Another game analysis video. This time it's going to be actually a very crucial opening and a very common one, the Grünfeld. And we're going to look at a very crucial idea in the Grünfeld that is sometimes missed by a lot of white players, and the black players sometimes don't know a lot how to counteract that. So let me just take you through the opening. So I'll go over the opening soon, but let me just say what the idea is. The idea is an early e5 in the Grünfeld, as you may have seen from the title of the video. So an early e5 in the Grünfeld is usually a positional mistake, and now we will look at why this is the case. So let's start off. We have this game here between Carloso 222 and Piece F. If you guys have watched my Chess Wars videos, you might have seen these two players. So we start off knight d4, knight f6, and now knight f3. Not the most common way to go for Grünfeld, because now after g6 and c4, d5 here is actually incorrect, and this is something I want to make sure is understood, because here if knight c3, we transpose back to the normal Grünfeld. But what happens here after c takes d5? Now after knight takes f6, e4, this in the Grünfeld, when this happens, let's see the main line here. So here white went knight c3, bishop g7, takes, and now e4. Now you can take the knight here, but in the variation we just looked at, after d5, knight c3, you cannot, d5, you cannot do that here. So takes, knight takes, and e4, and now there's no knight to take on c3, so you have to probably retreat, and this isn't so optimal. Now knight c3, and white just has a two-pawn center for no good reason. The point of the Grünfeld, why this is playable, the Grünfeld, and this move order wasn't punished by white, in fact, here. It was a blitz game though, but still, white should be cognizant of these things. What happens here is that, contrary to the previous position, you don't just have two pawns next to each other with the b pawn remaining here. What happens is that this c pawn is weak, and now when I play c5, I have a lot of pressure. If we compare that to this variation here, these two pawns, when I play the bishop on g7, I could, like for example, if I do add pressure on d4, white can simply play d5. In that previous position we were just looking at, if white plays d5 here, bishop takes c3 check would completely win for black. So that's something very important. So here d5 is an inaccurate move order. You should play bishop g7, and only after knight c3 play d5. Okay, but this move order wasn't punished, and now we transpose to something known. This is takes and e4. This is the Grünfeld exchange variation, because we exchange these knights on c3. And now black's typical idea is what? Is to completely demolish d4. c5 is very important, attempting to take on d4. Knight c6 to add more pressure on d4. So knight c6 to add more pressure on d4. c5 to add pressure on d4. Bishop g4 is a very important move, removing one of the defenders of d4. Queen a5 is also a very good move, attacking the weak, possibly c3 pawn. Sometimes even queen b6 to attack d4. And this rook here, when you castle, it goes to f8, and then it should go to d8 to also attack d4. Okay, I might keep these arrows, even though they're a bit confusing. Okay, so castles happened here, normal, and bishop c4, not so normal. Now, bishop c4 might seem like a very reasonable move, attacking this f7 pawn, adding pressure. But the problem is, and this might seem like a very futuristic idea, but it actually happens or could happen in a line in this game. When you play c5, knight c6, and bishop g4, first of all, when bishop g4 happens, the pin is maintained on the knight. The main line of the Grünfeld is to go bishop e2 to break the pin on the knight, so that after bishop g4, there's no pin on the knight. So bishop c4, another problem is that it's open. It leaves itself liable to such moves as knight a5, which is very typical in the Grünfeld, and knight e5, which is also very typical. Now, these might not be possible right now. Knight c6, knight a5 is technically possible right now, but it will soon become apparent. So bishop c4, the bishop is simply misplaced. It has been seen sometimes in Grandmaster games, but it's not a good line at all. So bishop e2 is the main line, c5, okay, and this is what we'll take a look at. I did include the e5 things, but first let's take a look at the game. So bishop c4, c5, okay, adding pressure, a very normal Grünfeld move. And now here white should have taken the opportunity to defend his center with bishop e3. Even though here black kind of equalizes after knight c6. d5 is never possible because of bishop takes c3, of course. Bishop takes c3 check. So he simply castles and lives with this pressure. And now takes, and bishop g4. And now we're threatening to take the d4 pawn. So d5 is played. e5 is played to protect this pawn. And yeah, I added this line. Now we can take a look at it. So knight e5 is probably the best move. You might think bishop takes a1, winning this bishop. I think queen takes a1 is possible. But d takes c6 is what's recommended. And now b takes c6, of course, we just win this bishop. So bishop g7, going back with the bishop, maintaining it. And now c takes b7. You might think this isn't so bad for black, but after takes, and bishop a6, we're going to lose this and the exchange, and white stands better. So after c5, so knight e5 here, going back here. So bishop g4, d5. Bishop takes a1 is incorrect. Knight e5 is correct. And here white should have, you just retreat. White should have an okay position. Always remember that sacrificing the exchange in this line is acceptable for white. So yeah. But instead here, instead of playing bishop e3, which might have maintained some semblance of equality, white played e5, a huge positional disadvantage, a huge positional mistake. Now I will talk why this is such a mistake. Okay, so first of all, you have to consider our plan as black. Our normal plan is to play knight c6, bishop g4, and take on d4. And the reason why e5 makes this plan much stronger for black is that now you first of all wasted a tempo. You're not castling, you're not playing bishop e3. So now when I play something like let's say bishop g4 here, and then knight c6, I'm threatening immediately to take the d4 pawn. Okay, and another factor to consider is that you can't push d5 now, because if you push d5, I simply take on e5 after I play knight c6, of course. So here, but it's important to be precise with the move order. So we took a look at this bishop e3 stuff. I will return to the earlier opening discussion later. So now here, knight c6 would actually not be such a great move. This is the move that was played in the game. The best move, in fact, is to be very precise with the move order and play queen a5. Why is this such a strong move? The reason is that I'm attacking c3. Of course, we don't want to lose that pawn, so the only logical way to defend is with bishop d2. There are other moves, like maybe queen c2 you could say, but here I simply take and play knight c6. Among other things, maybe bishop g4. Queen c2 isn't a serious consideration. Now bishop d2, of course. Now you can't really take, because after takes you gain a tempo. So, but it's important to play here. What's important to play is bishop g4, pinning the knight. And now, because white would have to waste the tempo and then I'd play knight c6, basically white is going to lose this d4 pawn. There is no way out of it. And the pin is very strong as well. As I said, d5 doesn't work because I take on e5. So some people after bishop d2 have tried knight c6, but that's not so good because simply h3, and now I'm not getting in bishop g4 and I'm not winning this d4 pawn. That's problematic. So bishop d2 very important. I play bishop g4 and now h3. All right, trying to remove the spin, but I simply take back and play knight c6 now. d5 again isn't possible because of knight takes e5, and now I'm threatening c takes d4 and knight takes d4. So white plays rook d1, a bit of a let's say, tricky move. Now, of course, I could take, but I don't want to lose b5, so I play e6 first, just trying to delay things a bit. Of course, bishop e3, now I simply take with check, so white castles, preparing maybe bishop e3. But now I take, and play queen a4. You could also take d4, but again, I don't want to just play this position. Even though this position I'm a pawn up, but there is a bit of compensation for white because of the bishop pair, and some activity with the queen and potentially the rook. What I play is queen a4, a very accurate move, attacking c4, and if the bishop were to move, I simply win d4. No problems there. So the bishop is defended, rook a d8, adding insane pressure on d4. I want to capture with the rook now. I don't want to capture with the knight again because b7 would be hanging. So bishop e3, but now finally I have to take. And now in this version, if you compare it to this other version, notice what happened here. I have my rook on this file. So it's kind of like I won a tempo here. I have my rook on the d file, while if you compare this position, my rook is still on a8. And this change is maybe that the rook is on c1, but that's arguably not so great for white. So this is one way. Now after bishop d2, bishop g4, there is also the possibility of immediately castling instead of h3, immediately castling. And now knight c6. And now there are possibly two moves, knight c6, simply again threatening to win d4. But I should be careful because my queen is still in the line of fire of the bishop. So rook b1, I remove the queen out of the line of fire. I still attack e5 with the queen. So bishop e3 has to be played, but now takes, c takes, and now knight takes e5. A very strong move because my queen is also lining up with this bishop. So d takes e5, queen takes e4, he takes this, I take that. Takes, okay. And what happened here? What happened is that I haven't passed a pawn and I have the bishop pair. So even though I didn't win the pawn here, this pawn is weak, I have the bishop pair, I have the a pawn, black is basically winning here. Now after castles, knight c6, instead of rook b1, bishop e2 is a very nice move, attempting to remove the pin, and after bishop takes f3, you again have this nagging pressure on b7, so c takes, knight takes would run into this weakness on b7. But I found a clever way for black to respond to this. So we could, of course, win a pawn or give up the b7 pawn and just win a central pawn, but we want something more. So we play rook f d8 here. Actually, no, the move I found is queen a3. Rook f d8 would show a kind of problem. So let's follow the line. It's very forcing. Queen c2, I go rook c8, just lining up with the queen. The reason I do not play something like this is because of bishop e3. And now I can't really take because my queen is hanging. So I can't do something like this. Let's say. Because my queen is hanging. So here, after... so I cannot play queen c7. So let's say rook a c8. Preparing queen c7. Then my queen would be protected. Queen b2, now defending d4. Very clever maneuver by white. I take, he takes back, and now I play queen b6, attempting to completely demolish d4. But the problem is he can trade now, and now play bishop e3. And in this position, yes, I win the pawn, but after takes and this move, let's say this, and this, bishop f3, and takes. I am up a pawn, but it's opposite colored bishops. Now, be careful. Opposite colored bishops in the middle game, for example, they offer a good attacking chances. In the end game, it's more so a draw, but with rooks on the board, it's not necessarily a draw. But to be honest, this position looks very staid. This extra pawn, it needs ages to move. In the hands of a good player, it might be winning, but probably objectively, I believe it's draw. So we don't want to play rook ac8. So I thought after bishop e2, why not play rook f d8? Now with queen c2, we play, sorry, I meant, what is it? Yeah, bishop e2, we play queen a3 immediately. Simply trying to meet, simply I mean, getting out of this queen b6 business. So we play queen a3, and he plays rook b1, and now we can take. And by the way, our queen there was on c7, but now on a3 it can also attack a2. So let's take a look at this line. Queen takes a2, and now we take a2. He might win b7, but we win e5. This position is much better than the one we looked at. Okay, he might win here, but take a look. Again, we have the passed a pawn. Yes, this pawn is passed as well, but our pawn is better. It's faster, and it's more on the side, so that's an advantage in the endgame. Yeah, it being an outside passed pawn. Okay, so but rook b1 and takes. What about c takes instead of knight takes? Here we simply take, and b7 is not really a bother because now we play here, and our queen and our rook is lined up. Maybe f4, but now we take a2. This position does offer white a bit of compensation. We do have the passed a pawn, but the bishop pair is strong. Our queen is a bit sideways here, and our bishop is biting on granite, but black should be better with his extra pawn, all factors considered. So, yes, I know this is a lot to remember, but when you really know how to defend against this e5, it becomes, when you really have this right thought process, it becomes easy. And you could even not play the best moves and still get an edge because you're going to be up a pawn or have a positional edge. But I thought that with queen a3 you get the most out of the advantage. Okay, unfortunately in the game knight c6 was played, so we're just going to take a brief look at the game. I was mainly interested in the opening, castles, and now bishop g4. Still, black should have a small edge because e5 is wrong. But now after bishop e3, he goes wrong here. He should have taken here, intending to meet takes with blah blah blah. We win a pawn. But the problem is white has a lot of activity for this pawn, the bishop pair, and a lot of activity, a lot. Simply queen e4 here, knight c6. Black, yeah, it's difficult because this pawn is going to be threatened so many times. There's the bishop here. It's difficult to convert this to a win for black. Maybe even white could be better in some cases, but it should offer black a very smidgen of an advantage. Now there is the possibility here of bishop takes, but then queen takes, bishop b3 because we're attacking it with the queen. That's why also bishop c4 is misplacing the bishop, because when we take on d4 with a heavy piece, it's going to be attacked, as we see in this position. Now takes. Okay, this again, queens on the board. There won't really be much of an attack here, but so it's probably still a draw, even though opposite colored bishop middle games offer an advantage for white, not for white, for the side with an extra pawn or a stronger bishop. Here it should probably be closer to a draw, but still black can play on and get an edge maybe. So this was his last chance here to rectify his errors, Mr. Piece F. But here after c takes d4 and c takes d4, he didn't even play c takes d4. And by the way, the line here, bishop takes d4, is not good because of queen c7. You could also conceivably take here and take this, and again we enter into the same endgame. But queen c7 is much stronger because you simply win e5 and don't enter into an opposite colored bishop situation. But anyway, all of this wasn't played. Instead, piece f simply played knight a5. That's generally a good move in the Grünfeld, but here with this e5 structure, there was a better way to make use of this with c takes d4. Now the bishop simply retreats, and now b6, another error. You should simply play rook c8 here. If the pawn is captured, you play queen c7, attacking this pawn, a very common idea on the Grünfeld. You never trade, of course. You just add pressure to the center. But now b6, and he played h3. I have no idea why he didn't take. I offered some lines here. No real need to look at them. I'm just taking a look at them quickly. There are some tactics here, for example, like this. And white ends up a pawn. Because if you take c3, knight takes f7. And if you try to defend, I can probably simply take and try to play pawn up, I guess. Though my pieces are a bit passive. Yeah, well, no real need to take a look at this. But he should have done this. D takes c5. Instead, he played h3. Yeah, so he played h3. And now takes. And now the last mistake of the game. Piece f played e6. Giving up the rook in the corner. Now, this isn't this rook. Like this rook you can give up because this bishop is very important. But white really doesn't care. He can just take this bishop and be a-okay. Because the light squared bishop is an unopposed bishop anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much for him to keep him. Yeah, and we'll take a look at the end of this game. Queen d5, trying f6 is a bit weakening, maybe h6 was better. But f6 weakens a lot, and this came to bite him. Queen a8, he had to get out of this. And now taking here, in principle you shouldn't trade pieces when you're down material, so I liked rook e8. But he took here, and rook d7, and this is collapsing. Bishop f8, simply this, and we're threatening queen f7 mate. And GG, knight here is only delaying the inevitable. What do you play here? Probably anything once. Okay, well, we shouldn't really take a look at this. It's just an exchange down. So bishop f8 wasn't played and black resigned. So very, very instructive game because we know how to deal with e5 now. And now that we know how to do that, let's consider in the opening bishop e2. So bishop e2, c5, and now e5. Now the problem here, it still is slightly better for black, but it's not as bad. Why? You must know why. Because bishop g4 now, there isn't a pin anymore. And when bishop takes, if you remember one of the lines, bishop takes f3, there's pressure on b7. So it's not so simple here. So knight c6, again, if d5 we take on e5, so castles, and bishop e6 probably here. If bishop g4, simply bishop e3, and white's center is not collapsing in this variation. And castles bishop e6 is probably better than bishop g4, because why is your bishop on g4 if white's center is not collapsing? You just want to probably play bishop d5 here. c4 is never really possible because of bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, and c takes d4. So that should be the way to play. My bad. So that should be the way to play in this variation. Black should have a smidgen of an advantage against bishop e2, c5, e5, knight c6, castles, and now bishop e6. But what makes it even worse, so bishop c4 is not a very good move, as we stated. Why? Not only he followed up incorrectly with e5, but even if he castles here, it should still offer black a slight advantage probably, or maybe just equal for white. But so bishop e2 is the main line, bishop e3 is also the second main line, and here c5, very natural. And now e5 is a huge error because we play the same queen a5. And now notice something in the line we looked at, if you remember here. So we looked at bishop c4, e5, and after c5, e5, and now after queen a5, bishop d2. Now if we take a look at this line with bishop d2, with queen a5, now the bishop has to go back to d2 to defend the c3 as we saw, and now it's just a waste of a tempo. So the same position occurred as in the bishop c4 line, but the bishop isn't even on c4. So that should again favor white after black after knight c6, and a later bishop g4. Yeah. Or you could even play bishop g4 here conceivably. Yes. Okay. So how to take advantage of this? In summary, just play c5, e5, and not knight c6 as was played in the game. Queen a5, bishop d2, and now very importantly bishop g4. Alright, so queen a5 and bishop g4 to make use of this pressure. Alright, so that should be it. We'll take a look at the application novel settings and the summary and the normal thingamajigs in this video. Alright. In summary, you can't play d5 in the Grünfeld without having a target on c3. Otherwise, your knight on d5 doesn't find any good squares. It can't take on c3, so it has to retreat to f6. And we've seen what happens with that pawn center for white. And 8 bishop c4 in the Grünfeld misplaces the bishop due to these knight e5 ideas. Sometimes we saw a line with queen c7 ideas. And it doesn't stop the pin on the white knight, so it's just, and doesn't even defend the white center, so it's just a probably bad move. Now also an early e5 in the Grünfeld is met with the typical Grünfeld plans of c5, knight c6, bishop g4, and queen a5. But again, remember, it's very important to be precise with the move order.
c5, then queen a5, then bishop g4, then knight c6. That's basically the correct move order. And when white's center crumbles in the Grunfeld, queenside play with the a-pawn. If you still have it, that's very good. And if not, or sometimes even if you do, maybe play in the center, put your rooks in the center and start attacking white. So that's it for the summary of this video. For the key concepts, in the Grunfeld, add pressure to white's center by playing c5, knight c6, bishop g4, queen a5, rook fd8 and rook ac8. This is the setup you need to know for the Grunfeld. And when white's center crumbles, as we mentioned, use the superior activity of your pieces to either play on the queen side with your outside passed a-pawn or attack in the center.
So for the application in novel settings, now it was very difficult to find the game. No master games, of course, occurred in this position because after bishop c4 they don't follow up with e5. Master is no better than to follow up with e5. But I found a game on Lichess between two 2300s which really showcases this line. And surprisingly, now what's funny is that this ended up into an exchange Grunfeld, but through the most insane transposition ever. It started out as what? As a normal Grunfeld, right? Okay, knight f3, bishop g7. Now bishop g5. This is the Petrosian system of the Grunfeld. Actually very popular. If you're a Grunfeld player, you'll face this a lot. So knight d4 was played, and now bishop f4. Kind of going into some sort of London system against the Grunfeld. Bishop f4. Yeah, if you play the Grunfeld, you'll see bishop g5 and bishop f4 a lot. Okay, so takes here. Now we're kind of going into some sort of exchange variation with takes on c4, but now. And now e4. Alright. Trying to take on c4. Why not e3 though? Trying to win the center. c5. Trying to break the center. e5 now. And now we're into the same position. The same position. But instead, there's the bishop on f4. So it's still not the same position. But now after queen a5, bishop d2, you guys will not believe this. This is a direct transposition to our line. Insane. But it will show what black does. So bishop g4 as we talked about, h3 as we talked about, takes, queen takes, knight c6 as we talked about, and now castles. Now here I recommended e6. Alright, but he took and played e6. Now taking here was probably warranted, but still after this move black must enjoy a big advantage. The e6 was played, takes, intending to take here, possibly, but that would simply, no, you would take, yeah, takes here, what am I saying, you just take. So bishop takes e6 check, king h8, and now the point was to just win this pawn with check, but now you take here, you take on c3, and what is this? How many pawns? Black has 2 pawns, and a lovely knight actually. This bishop is incredible. If only it could go there. This bishop is incredible, and this is basically winning for black, completely winning. So yeah, very interesting how this. It's very funny how this transposition occurred, but it shows that this line can occur and does occur. So you need to know it. Even a 2300 rated player fell for this, and this was a 3-minute game, not a bullet game or anything like that. Due to pre-move, someone fell for it. They just played this. Okay, the transposition happened, but it's been seen as well in other games. Okay, so next part of the video.
Fun fact time! So the first game to feature the Grunfeld was between John Cochrane, a very famous player, and Bonerjee Mohishander in 1855. Congratulations to Mr. Bonerjee for really giving us this awesome opening. So future considerations: can this bishop e2, c5, e5 line be a viable blitz weapon? Maybe as a surprise weapon in blitz? And how do you think a perfect chess engine would play the Grunfeld? And how would it play against it? That would be very easy. Like, what concepts would it use and what concepts might it break? Maybe you can use the AlphaZero example to kind of try to think about this. And finally, a bit of a joke. If Peter Zvidler and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave combined their powers, would there be a Blumengrunfeld? For those of you who played the Blumenfeld, you might have gotten the joke. Okay, so take care, guys, and yeah, it was a very fun video to do.